Good afternoon. Thank you for joining SickKids Ask Our Expert webinar series. I'm Kevin Goldthorp, President and Chief Development Officer at SickKids Foundation. I'm pleased to be joining you as your host this afternoon. It's my pleasure to welcome all of our friends or supporters to the Hospital for Sick Children and the Foundation in this October edition of Ask Our Experts, as we prepare to have fun once again on Halloween, as it's reintroduced in Ontario, to celebrate one of the many holidays, religious observances and special festivals between now and the end of the year, where people from all backgrounds gather, many in different ways, and quite frequently enjoy sweet treats and desserts during snacks, in meals, with loved ones, friends, and on their own. Today, we're going to be looking at the not so sweet side of sugar, specifically sugar's effects on the developing brain and bodies of infants and children. I'll be guiding the panel through our series of questions we developed with them, but please feel free to use the question and answer, the Q&A function, to submit new questions or queries to my colleagues. They'll get them to me and I'll try to weave them as best possible into our discussion this afternoon. Now, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce you to our three panelists. First of all, Dr. Catherine Birken, Paediatrician, Professor at the University of Toronto, and a Senior Scientist in Clinical Health Evaluative Sciences at SickKids Research Institute. Second, Daina Kalnins, Director of the Department of Clinical Dietetics Breastfeeding Program at SickKids, as well as being an author of numerous books about nutrition for kids and teens. And Vanita Pais is a registered dietitian and certified diabetes educator at SickKids. So panel, welcome. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Let's enjoy the sweet and not so sweet side of this topic. So first, I thought it'd be helpful for our viewers and listeners to get to know each of you a little bit more through the work that you do at SickKids, and also talk about why the topic of sugar consumption is so important to you from your professional perspective. Vanita, I thought we'd start off with you.
Okay, thank you. So I've been working at SickKids Hospital for more than 15 years now as a diabetes educator and a registered dietitian. And I do see an increased prevalence rate of especially type 2 diabetes in younger children. And as we all know, that type 1 diabetes, the risk factors for that condition is kind of inconclusive. We don't know the real risk factors for it, but we do definitely know for type 2 diabetes, especially in children and adults too, the risk factors are your environmental factors. There are individual factors, genetic factors, and societal factors for sure, but they do influence that impact on that person developing type 2 diabetes. And as we all know that, we are in a society that we are so fast paced and we are like always on the go, and people are relying to a lot of that convenience. We are finding that people are eating a lot more, especially in my role as a dietitian. I do see that people are resorting to a lot of the convenience kind of foods and getting foods that are not home prepared, because it takes a lot more time. So that's why they are getting those added sugars, not just sugars, they're getting a lot of other things in their meals. That's resulting and impacting their weight and the outcomes we are seeing. So, I mean, being also diabetes educator, I just want to add that sugar is a part of a healthy diet, and you do still need it because it is important, but the sources matter. So I'll stop there because we'll talk a little bit more later.
Perfect, Vanita. Thank you. Yes, we will come back to those topics. Just great context for everyone watching. Daina, you're next.
Okay, thank you. And thanks to everyone for joining this and for your interest in the topic. So as Kevin said, I'm the Director of Dietetics at SickKids, as well as the breastfeeding program. I do have still clinical practice. I work with patients with cystic fibrosis and with the lung transplant program. And when it comes to sugar, what I think my point on this is it's really important, I think, for parents to appreciate the effects of sugar on the diet in general, and just to ensure that they're choosing foods that are more nutritive rather than non-nutritive. And a lot of the sugar foods we associate with Halloween, for example, candies and perhaps some cakes and cookies, these are more non-nutritive sources. So in moderation. They're totally fine, but they can displace other healthier foods like fresh produce, fruits and vegetables. And that's so important for kids, for their health, for adults as well. So yeah, I hope that we answer some questions for the audience today and help them navigate through this time.
Thanks, Daina. Over to you, Catherine.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so delighted to be here today. So I'm a general pediatrician. I work on our inpatient unit at SickKids and also work in our SickKids Team Obesity Management Program. And I lead with others a research network in healthcare called Target Kids, where we try to study risk factors and protective factors for healthy growth and development in children. And we've been studying, nutritional factors over the last 12 years. And what we're seeing is that children are taking in a lot of sugars, an increasing amount of sugars in their diet, often in the form of sugar sweetened beverages, fruit juices and fruit drinks, and also in other products such as sweetened milks, and that these sugars are having an impact in children's health and their growth and development. So looking forward to talking about that more today.
Wonderful, thank you. So we have the perfect, I'll say the sweet combination of panelists who will give us the not so sweet side of sugar. So Catherine, just to start with you, I really, we prepare for these sessions and preparing with our three panelists, really sort of asked them to help us set out the why. Why is this important? And would like you, if you will, kick off as part of the conversation, Catherine. Can you give us a bit of the lay of the land around sugar intake? You referred to that in your own introduction, how it's changed over the years and the effects of that rising consumption of sugar. And what's the real problem that we're seeing here?
Yeah, thanks. I'm happy to start us off. We have some national data sources that tell us about what Canadian adults and children are taking in their diets. And it looks like one was in 2004, one was in 2015, and we have a recent one this year, which is really showing that Canadian children and adults are consuming up to 25%, so a quarter of their total daily energy intake is from sugars. And compared to 2004, those sugars seem to be increasing. And the ways in which children take in sugars include through sugary drinks, through other snacks, and through processed foods. And I think it's important to note that during the pandemic, there is emerging data that's showing that things have gotten worse. It looks like parents are reporting that over 35% of Canadians say that they've actually increased their consumption of sugar processed foods and unhealthy foods in the pandemic. So it looks like sugar consumption is quite high in Canada, in adults and in children. And the World Health Organization actually recommended that adults and children limit their intake of free sugars to less than 10%. So we seem to be at about 25%, but the worldwide recommendations is we should be actually at 10% and even better at 5%. So to put this in context, children are drinking, if you consume one, can of sweetened tea or lemonade, that's already exceeding your amount of sugar. So we're drinking too much sugar, we're probably consuming too much sugar. And in terms of the health impacts of sugar, increased excess sugar consumption seems to be related to increased body weight. And we know that we have very high levels of overweight and obesity in children in Canada and in parents. Sugar intake is also associated with dental caries. So cavities, people would be surprised to know how many children are admitted to the hospital for sick children for cavities, for infection in their teeth. And then of course, we know that sugar intake can be associated with early markers of chronic diseases in adults, such as diabetes, and even in children, and heart disease. So we have a pretty significant impact of sugary foods on health in children and adults.
Thanks so much, Catherine. Again, certainly shocks us into doing the math, either 5 times or 3 to 5 to 6 times more sugar being consumed than a recommendation would be. That's clearly there's an issue. You know, you've talked about some of the health implications. Vanita, did you want to add your diabetes experience, anything from your perspective in terms of the problem or the issue we're facing?
I completely agree with what Catherine is saying, that there is an increase in sugar intake, but I think it's also because there is a lot of these added sugars that we are talking about that's increasing in its intake. And when you're looking at added sugars, it's kind of tricky. Lots of people are not aware that they are getting this into their diet, because the key thing is that you need to know how to identify these foods in your regular, foods that you're having, like in cereals, in granola bars, in kind of really sometimes healthier foods, like people use cranberries into their salad or any of those things. They have hidden sugars that people have to get a little bit more kind of aware of these added sugars. And also it's kind of hard to know sometimes because the names of these sugars are changed. It could come in like beet sugar, it comes out in as white sugar that we all know of, and there are some other names that are in there that people are not aware, like the high fructose corn syrup and these kind of things. So it's really important to kind of go away from those packaged foods, go away from boxed items, and that's how you will kind of have those lesser hidden or those added sugars, because those are trickling into the system of many people they're a little bit unaware. Sometimes I find during my interactions when I'm doing those education sessions, I find that people are not really aware that, oh, that had sugar in them a lot.
So let's perfect segue then from me, Vanita. And I turn it to Daina. So Daina, heads up, you're going to be up next. Is this question? Let's slow down the conversation a little bit and let's talk about some of the most problematic culprits when it comes to children consuming too much sugar. If we have to start talking about the drinks, the foods, we have to watch out for being problematic, or as Vanita was alluding to, differentiating between natural and then added sugars, sort of delve into both the foods and then this issue of natural versus added and when to start watching out for it. So Daina, over to you first.
Sure. Well, anyone who knows me at SickKids knows that one of the main recommendations I give to parents, to colleagues, is really milk and water should be your beverages of choice as a young child, and then on. And get used to children being sensitive to when they're thirsty. It's not a sugar drink, it's water. Water will quench their thirst. So I've always believed that when you get in a car, everyone has their water bottle, whatever that looks like. It doesn't have to be a sugar rush, it's a thirst. And I recall many years ago, I read a UK study that showed that some children had no water in a day at all. They were drinking sweetened beverages and or milk. But the Health Canada, the Canadian Paediatric Society, and Dietitians of Canada, as well as our US counterparts, all agree that water and milk should be the beverages of choice. So I think if that's a principle that people appreciate and understand, we're going to eliminate a lot of sugar that's being taken in by kids. And the other thing is, like, a fruit juice, is it as healthy? No, it's lacking the fiber. It's got a lot more sugar than, like a glass of apple juice has much more sugar than a fresh apple. And the apple has so many other nutrients, and fiber being one of them. And I don't think we can really discuss this topic. We're saying we're getting too much sugar, but kids and adults in general get double the sodium they need and half the fiber they need. So by correcting that, by having more produce and more fresh food versus processed food, you can increase the fiber, decrease the sodium, and also decrease the amount of sugar. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I just wanted to make sure I got that message in. So I think we're really looking at kids having too much juice, sweetened beverages for thirst quenching, instead of water, and also having a lot of those treats that parents still offer a lot of, and not so much in moderation at times, like cookies and cakes and that are used for a lot of celebrations, when and at sport events, right? Bringing in all these sweets instead of going to fresh produce and fruits and things like that.
Got it. So the key message, I think we'll come back to a few times: drink water, don't drink sugar added drinks. A lot more on that. And of course, the idea of it, it's not just one problem. Once you start switching, you lose out on the increase your sodium and you decrease your fiber. Curious, just one supplementary question that I want to go to Vanita, back to Vanita, and then to Catherine. So Daina, on the issue of juice, it's interesting because you hit something curious here, that you may not be getting all the nutrients from drinking a juice versus eating the apple, let's say. Stick with that example. Help us understand a bit more about that.
So it's really, sorry, go ahead, Vanita.
Oh, I thought okay. So I just wanted to say that usually we encourage eating the whole fruit versus the juice, because if you think of a juice, you cannot get a cup of juice with one fruit. You have to squeeze at least 5 or 6 fruits to get that. And if you think about appetite, and if you think about how a person would eat, you cannot sit and eat 5 oranges at one time, but you could sit down and drink a glass of juice and still eat after that, because you're still not satisfied. So how nature created the fruit is that you would be satisfied eating that one amount. So portion control comes in right away. And the second thing is that those nutrients which Daina was mentioning is that you are getting rid of quite a bit of that fruit when you are having just the juice. You're having just the sugar part of it, the fiber is lost, and you're losing a lot of the fiber and those beneficial effects of, the other nutrients that are lost in the skin and things like that, which are important, and you need that for your body. So biting it, the motion of eating it and getting it also is kind of has a lot of benefits to keep your portions under control, plus feel satisfied and not get too much of that sugar at one time.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go to Catherine and come back to both of you. Catherine, we've talked about sort of drinking. I want to really focus on this issue of drinking your sugar content. Can you tell us why drinking your sugar content is so problematic?
I think both Vanita and Daina said it really well. I mean, you're taking in more calories by drinking. You're displacing other healthful foods. And you may miss some of those signs of fullness if you're drinking in your calories. So I think for all of those reasons, drinking sugar is likely much more problematic than eating the fruit and eating the food. So I guess the other issue is the vehicle. So how are you drinking the juice? Is it in a bottle? Then you're running into new problems with your teeth. So there's a whole bunch of problems with drinking your fruit. So I think it's a really clear message of drinking water, and if possible in an open cup.
Helpful. Now, great question coming in from the audience, and I'll stop and ask for them. The question about whether a fruit smoothie, so take your whole fruit, you drop it in the blender, is that as problematic as drinking a fruit juice? Comment. I don't know who to throw that one to. Do you want to, Vanita, do you want to start, or to Daina?
I think it's still, it's not problematic if you are making a fruit smoothie with controlled amounts of, like I said, like, would you be able to sit down and eat those fruits if you added like 5 fruits or 6 fruits? So depending on what's the portion and how you're making that smoothie, right? So if you're going to be using a little bit of plain white, like yogurt, not lots of sugary flavored yogurt, you're going to use 1 fruit or a couple of berries, maybe blueberries and strawberries, and then you're going to add maybe a little milk if you want to add more, or that's it. That's fine. That's absolutely fine, because the portions, it is satisfying, and it is really not any added sugars in it, and it's fine. You can have it. But when people start adding a lot of fruits at one time, like I know, like sometimes when I am talking even to my patients or talking to them, they may make smoothies that are really with a lot of fruits in them. Like they will probably use a couple of bananas, couple of mangoes, couple of add like at least 5 different kinds of fruits. Again, it's the portion. It's the portion. Even if you did add 5 fruits, but you had small portions and you would be able to be controlling that portion, that's fine. I still do think the smoothie is acceptable and is healthy. But again, the amount you're putting in and how you're making it really becomes the big question.
So I hear, again, just as I keep hitting the point you're making, one, drink water, not that. If you are want to consume your fruit in a liquid format, you're selling rules emerging here, put in the blender what you would normally eat. So if you eat a banana and a couple of strawberries, a banana and a couple of strawberries is appropriate. 2 bananas and 2 mangoes and a cup of strawberries is not something you likely would sit down and eat. That should be your warning sign. So it's very common sense here.
Yes.
Okay. I want to return to something that I think between Vanita you raised, but I'll turn to Daina just for a second and then back to Vanita. Can you comment on forms of sugar? Because we've thrown around some glucose, fructose, sucrose, corn syrup. Is there something we should understand about, is one better than the other? Are we watching out for a certain type of sugar? What am I watching for when I look at the labels and think about what I'm feeding my kids?
That's a great question, Kevin, and Vanita has a lot more knowledge in the background of that, because that's what she does with her patients and families, is looking for that sugar. So it's the added sugar. I don't think it matters what form it is. It's really the added sugar piece of it that's the issue here. That contributes to a lot of the excess sugar that Catherine was talking about before that we're taking in. So when you're looking, I think it's more important to appreciate a natural sugar. So a sugar in a fruit, while Vanita might be counting that in a diabetic plan, it is a different kind of sugar because it's associated with a lot of other nutrients. And then when you're looking at labels, I think it's where they fit on that label. If it's a first or second ingredient, you know that product is going to be something that has a lot of sugar. You can see it in its distribution, but I think it's important to appreciate what a label needs. And I think Health Canada has done a great job of a great website to look at, to appreciate what labels mean and what those added sugar means. So I don't know if Vanita, you wanted to add on that, anything more specific.
Yeah, I think Daina, you summarized it well, that we're not looking at these sugars that we get from healthy fruits and our foods, because when we think of sugars, all carbohydrates turn into sugar in our body. So you can get carbohydrates from whole grains, from fruits, from vegetables, from milk, yogurt, and of course our sweets and treats give us carbohydrates, which in turn all turn into sugar in our blood. So we do need our healthy sugars. We need, as I said, sugar and glucose is important for our muscle function, for our brain function. So we do need it. Kids need it for growing, for energy, but it's that type of sugar what we're looking at. So we're looking at more the processed or the foods that we talk about: soft drinks, fruit drinks, yogurt, flavored yogurt drinks, cookies, cereals, candy. These kind of things are those added sugars we are talking about, where it is highly processed. And of course, I'm not saying that they cannot have any amount of it, but there's a certain amount that's allowed that we would recommend. So when Catherine was also talking about the WHO guidelines, we say that about 5 to 10%, the WHO says 5 to 10% of your calories can come from simple sugars or from added sugars. That means you can have a candy once in a while, but it depends in the whole full day what you're doing. If you're going to start your day with a sugary cereal, and then you're going to have a snack of a sugary yogurt or a flavored yogurt drink, then you're going to have a granola bar, and you're going to have a lot of other packaged items during the day. You're going to add up to a lot of the added sugars. And that's where we want people to be cautious about looking at those products they're buying. We say that if the labels, when I teach people, I do tell them to look at the sugar content for a serving. And we do say that try to aim for less than 10 grams of sugars in a serving. So that's where we want to think of is those added sugars of those packaged foods. How many of those are you consuming in the day? Not your fruit and vegetables and whole grains, milk. These things also have sugar, like they turn into sugars, but they are healthy sugars. We need them because they have added nutrients.
Fabulous. I want to ask a whole panel of questions. So, warning about who sets these guidelines. You know, it's the World Health Organization. Who said how confident are you that the 5% is a reasonable, healthy guideline, and to what degree are these guidelines influenced by lobbying, or can we believe or have confidence that a 5 or 10% guideline is sound medically, not just great lobbying?
That's a great, I mean, go ahead, Vanita. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's a great question because this was based on a lot of the literature review that WHO did with studies that backed it up to tell us that we, not just people, everybody, kids, adults, everybody should try to keep their sugar consumption less than 10% of their total calories. And evidence suggests that when we do that, you're going to have those nutrition related issues decrease. That means things like obesity, diabetes, hypertension, any of these kind of conditions, they say there's going to be a lesser incidence when we have less than 10% of our calories from sugars. If we have less than 5% of our calories from sugars, you see other additional benefits because you're going to have lesser amount of lots of other things. They're talking about free radicals, they're talking about glycated end products. There's a lot of other things also that you see, other benefits also, not just the nutrition related chronic diseases. So 5% is quite low. It's sometimes hard for people to follow. So the general guidelines are at least 10% of your calories can come from, keep it to that lower under 10% mark of sugars is going to give you that benefit you're looking for.
Very helpful. Daina, anything to add to that? Or I'm going to go to Catherine and ask a question.
Well, I think it's just like Vanita, I obviously agree with everything she said. And when you look at health problems that we have and look at all the studies, pulling them all together and trying to make an influence, obviously, if the WHO, they have their experts who look at all these studies and see globally what we can all do, where the problem is. I would, trust in their recommendation for helping to reduce it down to that level. It's just hard for we're all kind of in the health field, and Vanita and I as nutritionists, or dietitians, we can look and say what 10% means, but that's not, what does it mean to you? What's 10% of so what they try to do is say this means, 5 teaspoons of sugar, 6, but even what does that mean when you start pulling, and people aren't going to take ketchup and say, okay, I just had a teaspoon of sugar. I mean, it's possible to do that, but how do you make a recommendation to support a healthy initiative and make it practical, right? And that's, I think, what we're trying to do here is to make it more practical, and that it really is moving to produce and to healthier foods and to the kind of drinks that support a decreased sugar intake. And because I can't help myself, I say when it comes to juices and sugar-laden beverages, like have a child quench their thirst first, like have them drink some water first, and then they can have a bit of a sweetened beverage, right? But because it's really appreciating that they're thirsty, and that's natural. That's what our body needs, fluid. Why not make choice, and then they can add on because they'll quench their thirst with the water, and then they'll if they still need something, they can have a little bit of something that's sweetened.
Fabulous.
I just want to add to that is that I think people have forgotten that, I have to remind parents all the time that the first sign of hunger is thirst. And when you are hungry, always first remember to drink some water, because that is the first sign. And people are dehydrated too, like they're not drinking enough fluids. Just just water and stuff they're not drinking, and they think it's hunger and they eat. So I always remind parents that if the child is telling them hungry, make sure they've had enough water in the day, and then offer them food, because that's the first sign of hunger for all of us.
Perfect, and great segue again. So Catherine, I have two questions for you. First of all, we talked a lot about displacement, and I think we've talked around it. I just want to give you a chance to talk about how the consumption of sugary drinks displaces consumption of other, and have people have that concept in their minds if they take away a couple of things today.
Yeah, I just to reiterate what Vanita and Daina were saying about quenching thirst and thinking about whole foods. Like nobody is or probably should be counting the percentages of sugars in their diet. Like it's impossible to live like that. But I think replacing sugary drinks with whole fruit and vegetables. I think reducing our processed foods in general is going to get automatically a reduction in sugar, in the added sugars that are not healthy. This idea of displacement is, if we fill up on sugary drinks or sugary foods and we eat them first before we drink water, for example, then our body is telling us we're not hungry anymore. So we're not only are we filling up with non-nutritious foods, we're also displacing the opportunity to eat nutritious foods. And then we're losing out again on all the vitamins and minerals, fiber of nutritious foods. So it's sort of a lose-lose when we're eating highly processed foods and drinking sugar.
Thank you, Catherine. Now, the second question I wanted to get to, we've talked a lot about, all of you have mentioned milk as a healthy choice. And yet, I believe, Catherine, you've also done some research, I know heavily on sugary drinks and fruit drinks, but also on milk. Is there a caveat or a footnote you want to attach to milk consumption?
Yeah, I think we know milk is very important, and especially in young children as they grow and develop. And I think the recommendations around 2 cups per day, of course, depending on the child's age and developmental stage. I see many children that drink quite a lot of milk. Again, they fill up on milk, and then that displaces other healthy foods, and they can get into trouble with iron deficiency anemia. We see that quite commonly, actually. And then I think the other issue that you raised, Kevin, is that, if you go to the grocery store and you have a look at the options for milk, in addition to cow's milk, there's many other types of milks now that children and adults can purchase. And those milks have varying degrees of nutritional value. So they have quite different amounts of protein. So some of the things that we think that we're getting when we drink milk. And a lot of them have a lot of added sugars. So, those sweetened milks, taste quite good, but if you look at the labels, they actually have quite a bit of added sugar. And I don't think people, at least the families that I see, don't necessarily know that. They think they're choosing healthy choices in milk, but they haven't, realized that there's actually quite a lot of added sugars in many of those milks. So an added footnote there.
Great, thank you. So, warning: all milk is not created equally, or milk beverages. Let me just transition slightly into this certain event that's happening on Sunday as an idea of then these things that happen in terms of encouraging sugar consumption. We certainly don't want to leave today with people thinking, oh, all they said was you can't have any sugar. It's part of our cultures worldwide, and it certainly can be a part, as you've emphasized already. It can be part of just a healthy way to live, to enjoy, and to be part of a social group. But can you give some recommendations or thoughts on how, as individuals and then as families, we manage our sugar consumption? Maybe I'll go reverse. I'll start with Catherine, Daina, and then Vanita.
Yeah, I think great question. I think where it's possible, eating together is a really nice way that helps children and families, slow down eating, having a conversation while you're eating sort of allows the body time to get those cues. Okay, I'm full, or maybe I don't need to eat, I'm moderating my intake. And of course it gives people, children and families, an opportunity to have conversation and think about their health and well-being together. That's not always possible, but aiming to eat together, I think, is a really important thing. I think aiming to eat without a screen on is another message that I often discuss with some of the families and children that I see, because when we're watching the screen, it's been shown that we, again, don't really attend to our cues. We eat a lot more than we might have otherwise. And children eat a lot of highly advertised and processed foods because we're getting messages from advertisers while we're engaged in the screen. So those would be the two general messages around eating, healthy eating.
Daina, to you.
Yeah, so talking about Halloween in particular, I get asked this question from families: how do we manage the bags of candy that roll into the house at the end of trick-or-treating? And depending on the family, like I mean, every family is different, and how they manage that consumption is really up to the family to decide. But what I have recommended, and what I practiced with my own children when they were younger, was when they're in those younger toddler years, when they got home, they knew beforehand they weren't going to be getting that whole bag that they bring home. So we said, okay, pick your 10 favorites, pick your 10 favorites out of that, and then you get to have those. And then people ask, well, is it better that they spread it out over, a week, or have it all at once? What's better? And again, like, spreading it out could last 2 or 3 months. Like, the amount of candy that some people bring home, having too little chocolate, that's every day. So that's something personally I wouldn't be in favor of, but it's up to the family to decide how they're going to manage this huge amount of chocolate and candy that comes in. And same with as kids get older, again, just having that conversation. You may not keep it all, but for some families that may not work, and they'll just have to figure out together what makes sense for them in terms of their philosophies around that, right? But they know, like, it's pretty known that if you have that and they're going to just have that for lunch for 2 weeks and not eat the rest of their lunch, that's not a healthy option. So
very helpful. Thank you, Daina. Vanita, to you then.
So a couple of things that I agree completely with Catherine and Daina's suggestions. I would just want to add that, we need to also start changing our thinking of how we are looking at Halloween and with our treats. I do always talk to families, telling them that try to give other options instead of a treat. Use stationery, use erasers, use pencils, use something different to give out and make a change that way, so that we're not only giving packets, sweets and things like that. Think of other options, maybe giving a fruit. I don't know, but I don't know how that will go with kids. But I just want to say that trying to change the approach of giving just candy for Halloween, that can be one kind of a suggestion. The other thing is that when we look at variety, so when we look at, several studies have found that when people have a large amount of variety, you eat a lot more, because your satiety is not reached early with one item. You want to try all the different items there, or all the different candies, to get that satiety. So maybe limiting that variety would be my suggestion, is just kind of having, maybe pick your, like Daina said, your top 5 or your top 10, or just choosing only a few of them that they can have, so that they can have a variety of, maybe if it's Kit Kat and M&Ms and some Mars bars or whatever, they have just 5 limited varieties. So when you have a limited variety, that helps a lot. And it's not just, I'm saying it just because it's kind of, it's proven by even weight management studies. When people have lesser variety, they're able to maintain their weight better. And overall, keeping lesser variety in lots of things, whether it is snacks or whether it is meals, is always better, because then you're going to have faster satiety and you're not going to have this unlimited variety in front of you that you want to try everything. So that would be my suggestion, is limiting the variety and kind of aiming for maybe always 2 options for meals, 2 options for snacks, and maybe from Halloween candy 5 or 10. That's it.
Just
So
help us understand.
I have
So go ahead.
something, just a cute little anecdote, if I might. When my son was about 3 or 4 in his Batman outfit, and my husband took the kids out, and they were collecting this was early Halloween, and they collected some chocolates, and he got one that he already had one of, and he said to the neighbor, "It's okay, I already have that one. I don't need another one." And we didn't teach them that, but we were teaching them about balance and about limiting, and not to like having when you have a plate, it's about the balance and a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So he actually declined it because he said, "It's okay, I already have one." So you can teach children simple concepts early on.
Can I add one more
Yes,
thing?
Catherine.
I think it's very difficult if the food is, if those snacks are in the house and everyone knows they're available. It becomes a power struggle about when and if and so if I really love the ideas, Vanita and Daina's ideas of selecting your top whatever, and then I would suggest getting the rest of it out of the house. Because if it's there, it sets up a whole series of other conflicts and negotiations that take away from other valuable conversations with your children. So that would be one other suggestion.
Yeah, and it tests everybody's willpower, right?
Yeah.
Yes, well, and you raised a very important point. I think again for takeaways is that this sort of having a very wide variety of choices available to hand is in fact a challenge, because I want to elaborate a bit, but it sounds like our brains are programmed to want to sample the variety. So we said we're not sated until we actually can sample all the flavors, so to speak. So I hear you say one strategy here is reduce the number of flavors, reduce the number of choices. Now, can we? If I can, just because of what you've raised here and your strategies of how to address this at home, you mentioned, Donna, your anecdote about your son and sort of the messages from early. Do you have recommendations of how to be what good practices, what good tips and tricks can be put in place when children are very young to help them not make sugar an issue? You said you don't want to be negotiating all the time, Vanita, but what do you do from a very young age to set up a dynamic where sugar is not seen as the reward and the objective, but rather something that's had healthily in limited quantities, and our kids are choosing away from it?
I think that's a great question. I think Catherine mentioned it. First of all, don't have it in the house. So initially, when kids are young, you control what's in the house, and they haven't figured out that they can buy things on their own yet because they can't. So not have that and not make it as a treat. It's really about balance and about having a little bit of everything versus having just one food that's put on their plate. And also, when they're starting in their sports events and they're 4 and 5 at a soccer game, so initiated with the other families, who's going to bring the oranges versus the freezies and the Rice Krispie bars and things like that. Like there, your kids are doing something healthy, and then you're feeding them the sugar, and really simplify it. Who's going to bring the fruit to this game? And that just makes it easier. But back at home again, it's really just about if you're going to have something that's sweet, it's choosing the cakes and cookies less often. It's really all about moderation. They're going to have plenty of birthday parties to go to where they're just waiting for the cake and sweet. And again, that's something that parents can agree upon. And when you see fruit plates put out and cut up fruit, kids and adults go to that because it's there and it's prepared for them. So that's the other thing I recommend all the time is don't just leave the apples, the pears, everything in the fridge. Cut it up, lay it out there. So while your kids are doing homework, while they're watching TV, let them snack on the fruit and it'll go. It'll definitely go.
Great. Wonderful. Vanita or Catherine, to add to that?
I usually kind of tell parents that if you are thinking of having habits, it's always together as a family that you create habits, or like everything in moderation. Like it's not that they can never have a treat or those kind of things. I encourage families to even, you know, if they want to have a cookie or they want to make a cake, to bake it together. But you can always do a lot of different methods in which you can substitute some of the sugars with you know, like applesauce, or you can substitute it with lesser amounts of sugars. So there are modifications that we teach them, that they know that they can bake these things, but they're a healthier option because you're controlling the ingredients. When you make it, you're controlling the amount of sugar, you're controlling all those things. So you can make a healthier version of it when you do it together and do it at home. But it's difficult when you pick it up from outside. There's nothing controlled. There's everything that's unlimited. Like it's a lot of sugar or salt or fats or saturated fats in it that's added because they want to sell it. So they are going to sell it in a way that is very tasty. So I do encourage like a lot of traditional kind of foods, but also making it at home and modifying some of that recipe to help control that amount of sugar that's going in, or the ingredients, if we can substitute it without modifying the taste too much. So that's something I always kind of recommend. And also kind of giving kids a little bit of something to expect, right? Kids always want to know, like, when is the day they could have that special treat. So as a family, kind of having it as a family approach, okay, Fridays will be a day that we're going to enjoy a treat, or Sundays, or something that they would look forward to, but you do it together. And kids, you know, learn from it, and they will be like, oh, today's not yet Friday, or today's not yet Sunday. You know, so they know that those are not the days that they're going to. So you're giving them also like a little boundary to what to expect, and that it's not an everyday thing. It is a sometime thing. So we talk about these foods being sometime foods, how families can still enjoy it, but in a way that's not indulgent, you know.
Thank you. Thank you. Can we go to Catherine? Catherine, is there evidence that suggests that sugar, in fact, is addictive? If so, what cycle do we get into with an addiction like that, like sugar?
Well, I think there is some evidence that certain foods sort of trigger some areas in the brain. And I think often in the past, sugar and sweet foods have been used as a reward for behavior. And I think, you know, that is because, you know, they do set up certain signals. I really like the advice of really taking food out of the equation when it comes to behavior and rewarding behavior, that children and families are rewarded by positive attention, not by food. So I think it's really important to think about, you know, with respect to parenting skills, you know, how do we reward good behavior? And I would say we don't want to use food. There is good evidence that food is a very strong reward. So I don't think we want to perpetuate that.
So food is a fuel. It's not a behavioral device.
Yeah, and it's been used as such because it can be very effective at such. But then you're setting up probably some really negative coping strategies for children and adults moving forward. I think we know that actually very early on, younger children who take in sugary foods, sugary drinks, we know they have a higher desire for sugary foods as they grow. So, you know, avoiding the use of sugary foods as reward, avoiding high sugar content processed food in very young children actually translates into healthy eating as children grow into youth and into adulthood. So I think it's really important that we follow those sort of guidelines for children.
Very, very helpful. We've come at this from an individual level, from a choice side, from understanding sort of the hidden areas of sugar consumption, family behaviors together, and the benefits of that. Is there anything that, not making this a topic about COVID, but is there anything where the pandemic has exacerbated or improved trends in terms of sugar consumption and eating behaviors that you want to point out for a lesson learned?
I think that there's some evidence that there more home meal preparation has occurred because of COVID. And it's what types of foods, would be probably improved upon rather than doing the, quick fast food products, for example. So I haven't reviewed all of the background on that, but when I did, it was a year ago. There was a trend for more home preparation, which then provides the opportunity for increased skills in cooking, increased interest, and the increased control that then you have over the ingredients. And hopefully that continues so that you can prepare things in a more healthy versions. And like Vanita was saying, make things with less sugar. They do turn out, or even if you're going to select commercial products, you can mix them. You can have a vanilla yogurt and add a little bit of the favorite fruit yogurt if you don't want to add your own fruit, or have a favorite kid cereal but mix it with another one. If they really want chocolate milk, you can have your white milk and add a little bit of it. So you don't need to have a full glass of chocolate milk. There's ways you can take commercial foods and modify them as well, and it doesn't take a lot to do that. One I recommend, for example, is toast with a nut butter and use the Nutella as a jam versus the whole nut butter, right? Because Nutella is basically sugar, and it's sold as a healthy nut butter, but in fact, it's not as healthy as the others that don't have any sugar added. So there's ways you can do that with products and just alter them.
Fabulous, thank you. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think the jury's still out on what's been going on during COVID. I know there's some studies in the US and a few emerging in Canada around eating behaviors during the pandemic. And we're starting to look at some of the data that we've been collecting, and it's looking like there's a reduction in the amount of fruits and vegetables being consumed in young children. I think the data is still out there. I think one thing that we know is when schools were closed, schools have been a setting for provision of a lot of food, often healthy food for children with food insecurity and others. So in schools have been a major source for food provision for children. I think when the pandemic and schools and childcare centers were closed, that unearthed a lot of challenges with food insecurity, even in our city. So, we don't have a national food program for schools in Canada. So I think that's a focus of important work. So how can we ensure that there are healthy foods available in schools for children? So I think there's a lot of societal issues we should be thinking about when it comes to children. And I think the pandemic that's one of the many things that the pandemic has uncovered, in our country.
This team is wonderful. You're better at transitions than anyone else. So this is where I want to take us to the next question as we watch our timing too. What about the social policy level? And then, as Catherine, you said, there's lack of a national food program for children. Are there other areas where SickKids as a children's hospital can have a sort of stimulating voice on things that our society as a whole, one level up from families, be thinking about as we look at child and youth nutrition? What are the public policy issues you think should be debated and action taken on?
Maybe I can start. I think when we think about the child, of course, we think about the family, and then we think about the settings in which the child are living and growing. So those would be schools. Those would be in community settings, community centers. And, there are not a lot of regulation on what is available for children in those settings. Why is it that children can access, processed or really unhealthy foods in those settings, and what is the policy to address that? And I think the other really important policy issue would be that healthy foods are not affordable foods. So, we're promoting replacing sugary drinks with fruit and vegetables, but the costs of those foods have gone up. And how are we mitigating some of those issues? So, so make sure that all children have equitable access to healthy food. So I think those are some major policy issues as they come to, sugary or healthful foods.
Perfect. Vanita, anything you want to add to the policy side?
Yeah, I think if we look at the practical implications, just based on what I see in my practice, is that we do see there is a lack of knowledge. The information needs to be provided to consumers. Food literacy is lower. Even when you look at some of the recent studies, it tells us that food literacy doesn't matter whether the person had resources or no resources. Food literacy levels are low. So we need to look at what are the factors that impact the food illiteracy, basically, and look at how we can educate people and the causes for this food illiteracy. So my suggestion would be more education in this area, provide consumer information, make it simple for them, make it easy for them to access this information and to use it. So make it more user friendly. That's where I would want to see it, as more in terms of consumer education.
Wonderful. Thank you, Vanita. Daina.
I agree with Vanita. I really do recommend parents be educated on nutrition before they have children, so that they have an appreciation of, not just food preparation, but the importance of nutrition overall in health, and hopefully then learn on their own as well. And I really do commend Health Canada for moving to a different way to represent food in the new food guide with the plant-based diet, and really demonstrating on a plate what a healthy plate might look like, and incorporating all the different cultures we have. And I think that site, they could do a lot more. They have great resources and amazing recipes, but there's a platform right there that can be used, and add more advertising on TV and the newspapers on just health and eating, and that's not driven by any one company or any one group, and eliminating that and just speaking, from the expert point of view. So lots more work on that. That's what I'd like to see.
Perfect. Thank you. I had asked it to those watching and listening. I asked our panelists in advance to think about their top 5 do's and don'ts, and they've asked me to sort of summarize what they did in advance, and then you jump in, please, and things you've thought about during this session I've missed. Water works. Drink water. Minimize drinking drink drinks or other juice. Eat fruit. Don't drink fruit. Drink from an open cup, not from bottles. Eat meals and snacks while interacting with other people, not while watching a screen. Slow it down, more mindful eating, and avoid sugary snacks while watching TV or social media. You're missing otherwise your body's cues to control those. Do avoid having sugary drinks from schools and sports venues. Either don't encourage them, or be part of the lobbying not to have them available in those settings. Replace sugar added beverages with water or carbonated water, and add a bit of lemon lime juice to it. Make your own desserts. Control what you put in them. Don't necessarily purchase prepared desserts. You mentioned the point, eat as much fresh fruits and vegetables as you possibly can, and engage our children in making those fresh fruits and vegetables. It's amazing how fast a cut up apple goes down as a snack after school when it's put out there on the table. Be an example to our kids. These are changes that we can all think about and all make, and shift how behaviors occur in our families and with our home lives. And then become educated on healthy options. Avoid or minimize as many processed foods as possible, and be mindful of making those selections. What is healthy? What am I eating? What am I drinking? And reflect on then the last point you've made, reflect a society about advocating for the ability to access healthy food and have more food literacy built into our education and our daily lives. So those are the points that I noted from your do's and don'ts. Panel, if you have other ones, happy to have you chime in.
It's a good summary, Kevin. I think you captured us. Yeah.
Yeah, you got it all. Yeah.
So everyone's going to finish this, and what we're going to do, we're going to get our water bottle or a water glass, and we're all going to have a glass of water because we're hungry. It's pre-dinner, or we think we're hungry or thirsty. Have a glass of water and then reassess and think about what we just learned in this last hour. To Vanita, to Daina, to Catherine, on behalf of everyone listening, thank you very much. We're grateful for your time and participation in today, for the knowledge you've shared with us today, and for your optimism that it is both easy and enjoyable to make healthier choices, reduce the sugar, avoid the not so sweet effects of sugar, and live a healthier life. So to everyone watching, thank you for supporting SickKids. Thank you for support of our panel, and we wish you well and have a healthy, happy Halloween. Good night, everyone.
Wish you the same. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.